Look at a map of the United States. We are blessed with the greatest geographic defense system in human history. Two massive oceans, acting as thousand-mile moats. We have friendly, relatively weak neighbors to our north and south. We have abundant natural resources. So the logical question, and one that gets asked a lot, is, why does the rest of the world matter? Why do we care? It's a tempting thought, isn't it? Why spend the money, the energy, and the lives worrying about who controls a patch of sand in the Middle East, a shipping lane in the Indo-Pacific, or a border town in Eastern Europe? Why not just pull up the drawbridge, sit safely behind our oceans, and let the rest of the world figure out its own problems? People love to look back at the 19th and early 20th centuries as proof that we can do exactly that. They point to a time when this country, for the most part, stayed out of global entanglements, and think we could simply hit rewind and return to those days. But that nostalgia ignores a massive historical reality. We didn't have to secure the oceans back then because the British Royal Navy was doing it for us. We were able to quietly grow into an economic superpower behind the shield of the British Empire's fleet. Today, there is no one else but us holding that shield. So the idea that we can simply retreat and be left alone, it's a comforting fiction. But it is a fiction. The reality is that those oceans are not just moats. They are highways. The modern world is built on a foundation of global trade, access to energy, and the security of the global commons. The sea lanes, the airspace, and the digital networks that no single nation owns, but every nation relies on. If we step back, somebody else steps in. And if a hostile power gains dominance over Europe, or the Middle East, or the Indo-Pacific, or the global commons, they don't just dictate terms over there. They eventually dictate terms to us. They control the flow of capital. They control the flow of oil. And they gain the power to choke off our economy without ever firing a shot across the Atlantic or Pacific. We can't just hide behind two oceans. The reality is that the systems keeping our lights on, our economy running, and our society secure are inexorably linked to the global balance of power. But once you accept that American involvement is non-negotiable, a new problem emerges. How do you actually make sense of it all? How do you process the daily barrage of global crises without getting lost in the noise? To separate what actually matters from what doesn't, you need a framework. You have to break foreign policy down into three distinct levels: the strategic, the operational, and the tactical. Think of the strategic level as the ultimate destination. It is simply what you want to achieve. A strategic goal is a long-term foundational objective, like securing the free flow of energy or preventing a hostile nation from dominating a vital region. The operational level is about the tools you develop to achieve those strategic objectives. This is where alliances are built, military bases are established, and economic architecture is designed. It's the infrastructure of your policy. Finally, the tactical level is how you actually employ those tools on a day-to-day basis. It's a specific military strike, a targeted sanction, or a diplomatic summit. The media spends almost all of its time obsessing over the tactical level. But tactics are completely meaningless if they aren't serving a sound operational plan and a clear strategic goal. This framework sits alongside a very uncomfortable truth and a core tension in American foreign policy: the balance between pragmatic realism and democratic morality. As a democracy, we naturally want our actions on the world stage to reflect our values. We should always look forward and defend our interests, but we also have to recognize that perceptions matter. In our society, public opinion plays a massive role in what our government can and cannot sustain. And practically speaking, it's always easier to get what you want with honey than with vinegar. Soft power, our culture, our economic appeal, our diplomacy, absolutely works. And it is a vital tool for shaping the strategic environment. But we also have to confront a harsh reality. Not everyone thinks the way we do. We have a bad habit in the West of projecting our own worldview onto other nations, assuming that deep down everyone is a small L liberal who just wants peace, prosperity, and a quiet life. That is a dangerous assumption. There are simply bad actors out there. There are regimes with interests and value systems entirely counter to ours, who view the world strictly as a zero-sum game. You cannot always manage these actors with honey or soft power. Sometimes they need to be stopped. At times, that requires the use of blunt, overwhelming force. And sadly, when force is used, it brings with it the tragic, unavoidable reality of collateral damage. A truly successful foreign policy requires walking that razor-thin line. It means leading with our democratic morality when we can, but relying on cold, pragmatic realism when we must. When you apply that realism to the globe, you quickly realize something important. The world is not a flat map where every square mile demands equal attention. All territories do not hold the same strategic weight. Grand strategy requires ruthless prioritization. And for the United States, that focus is heavily concentrated on 4 key regions. 3 of them, North America, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific, are the engines of the modern world. They are crucial because they hold the vast preponderance of the world's human, financial, and physical capital. This is where advanced technology is developed, where humanity's industrial bases sit, and where global economic power resides. The 4th region is the Middle East. It doesn't have the same concentration of capital, but its geographic and resource leverage is unmatched. It holds roughly 50% of the world's proven oil reserves, supplies 20% of daily global oil consumption, and physically sits at the critical geopolitical crossroads between Asia and Europe. The overriding strategic objective of the United States in all of these regions is singular: ensure that the U.S. and its allies maintain a favorable balance of power. And under no circumstances can a hostile power be allowed to gain hegemony over any of these regions, meaning no single nation can become so overwhelmingly powerful that it can dictate the economic and security rules for its entire neighborhood. Why is preventing regional hegemony so critical? Because if a hostile power can consolidate control over their own neighborhood, they no longer have to expend resources defending their own borders. They can then leverage all of their financial and physical capital and project power outward, threatening other regions and potentially the United States directly. This objective is the skeleton key to understanding modern American foreign policy history. Preventing a hostile power from dominating the capital and industry of Europe is exactly why we backed the Entente powers, France and Britain, and eventually entered World War I, and why we kept massive military power stationed in Germany for the entire Cold War. It is also the underlying reason we fought World War II. Long before we were officially pulled into that conflict, the U.S. was already spending billions to arm Britain, doing everything short of deploying troops to prevent Germany from consolidating total control over Europe. And in the Pacific, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor specifically because the United States had placed a crippling embargo on their oil supply. That embargo was a direct, calculated move by Washington to stop the Japanese Empire from gaining unchecked hegemony over Asia. The Middle East requires the same strategy, but for a different reason. If a hostile power established hegemony there, they wouldn't necessarily build a massive fleet to sail across the Atlantic. Instead, they would control a significant portion of the global oil supply and dictate prices. Even though the United States produces its own energy in North America, oil is a globally priced commodity. But maintaining this balance of power isn't just about the land. It also relies on access to the spaces in between. This brings us to the global commons. The global commons are the domains that no single nation owns, but that the entire global economy relies on to function. The international sea lanes, the high-altitude airspace, and the digital networks. Securing American access to these commons is a non-negotiable strategic imperative. This means maintaining the power to control and secure the strategic geographic choke points of the world. It means guaranteeing the physical flow of energy and ensuring the United States has uninterrupted access to the critical raw materials that our economic well-being and technological edge depend on. This brings us back to that razor-thin line we talked about earlier. The friction between cold realism and democratic morality. If our core objective is maintaining a favorable balance of power, where does fostering free societies fit in? Let's be clear. Encouraging open societies is not our foundational strategic objective. Security is. When survival is on the line, the United States will, and does, ally with authoritarian regimes to prevent a worse, hostile power from dominating a critical region or exerting undue influence. But over the long term, promoting free societies is the ultimate strategic force multiplier. And this is due to a simple historical reality. True democracies generally do not go to war with one another. They make for vastly more reliable trading partners, stronger allies, and more stable neighborhoods. The more the world reflects our values, the cheaper and easier it is for the United States to maintain the global balance of power and secure our own economy. But, and this is the crucial caveat, we cannot force it. As John Quincy Adams famously warned over 2 centuries ago, America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. We cannot forcibly export our system at the barrel of a gun. Trying to do so usually creates chaos, not democracy. We have seen that ourselves firsthand. However, when an organic opportunity arises and the risk-to-reward ratio makes sense, supporting the rise of free societies isn't just a moral luxury. It is a cold, calculated strategic advantage. So ultimately, what is this approach I have been describing? This is not isolationism. We cannot wall ourselves off from the world. If we step back from the global commons, from the balance of power in critical regions, from the security architecture we built, somebody else fills the space. And the rules they write will not be friendly to us. The cost of withdrawal is not peace and quiet. It is paying tribute to whoever takes our place. This is also not neoconservatism. We are not in the business of toppling governments to plant democracies in their place. We tried that, and recently. It produced chaos, exhausted the country, and discredited the values we were supposedly exporting. What I have been outlining is a tradition this country has practiced when it has been at its best. Truman, Dean Acheson, and George Kennan formalized the framework after World War II. They saw a world where American power had to be applied with discipline, contain the adversary, build the alliance structure, Protect strength in the regions that matter. Avoid the wars you do not need to fight. We have wandered from that discipline more than once. Vietnam, Iraq, the post-Cold War decade when we mistook our power for permanence. And every time we have wandered, we have eventually come back to it, because the alternatives do not survive contact with reality. This is a time-tested and proven tradition. Not retreat, not crusade, a clear-eyed accounting of where the country's interests lie, what tools fit the problem, and what the country can sustain. The board is set, the competition is real, and we know how to walk this path because we have walked it before.